On Christmas Eve, the Spanish family Manel and Julia go to visit relatives. Having met their older sister Belen and her son Carlos, the couple spend a good evening. Manel devotes all his time to his little nephew, playing games with him and showing him a cat named Lucolo. The boy loves watching the animal through a hidden surveillance camera and asks to bring him along next time. After a family dinner, Manel and Julia put their nephew to bed as it is time for them to return home. Belen's husband is late at work, so the couple decides not to wait for him and promises to visit them again soon. On the way home, Manel notices that his spouse is silent as she is not in the mood. He guesses that the reason is his reluctance to have children of his own and tries to discuss the problem. Julia is angry about her spouse's decision and wants to change his attitude towards the family at any cost. At one point, she overtakes a truck, and as she continues to argue with her husband, pays less and less attention to the road. A few moments later, they are cut off by another car, which has made a dangerous overtaking. Frightened, Julia loses control and their car spins out in the middle of the road. The couple is badly frightened, but reassure each other as no one was hurt and everything was without more unfortunate consequences. Just as Julia tries to start driving, a truck crashes into them, causing the woman to lose her life. 1 year later, a lawyer and owner of a small solar energy company is closing in on himself. Since losing his wife, Manel has lived in complete isolation with his cat in a house in Galicia, keeping in video contact only with his sister and nephew. Being in a constant depression, the man does not pay attention to the news, which reports about the ongoing outbreak of a dangerous virus. It has shaken up the public no less than the previous pandemic, because of which all world leaders and the UN gather a series of urgent meetings. The virus is spreading rapidly across Europe and does not lend itself to quarantine measures, but the Spanish government reassures people that the disease is not a threat to their country. Manel doesn't watch TV, much more concerned with giving food and water to his cat. At one point, he turns the sound off altogether, not noticing the gruesome images. The media shows gruesome footage of the consequences that infection leads to. People don't just get sick, they mutate into infected individuals resembling aggressive zombies. Instead of learning more about what's going on, Manel heads to the dock to meet with potential buyers for his old boat, which he owned with his late wife. Once on shore, the man meets two girls actively asking about the boat and its functionality. Trying to find all the necessary documents, Manel notices the bracelet of the late Julia and remembers how he ended up here. A couple years ago, he bought a diving suit and other gear. His wife was enamored with her husband's appearance and tried to seduce him, resulting in the couple tearing the bracelet. For Julia, it was of particular value, so Manel decided to keep it and tie it inside the boat. A little later, the man goes to the nearest supermarket to buy some food. On the way, his sister keeps calling him, but he ignores her as he does not want to talk to anyone. At the store, Belen keeps calling Manel, but he takes his time answering his sister. While in the supermarket, he notices people's strange behavior, as if they are scared of something. Most of them panic and take everything they have from the shelves, so the supermarket employees ask them to be restrained in their purchases and promise not to let more than 2 items in one hand. Manel is shocked by the behavior and greed of people, as he knows nothing about the virus and the possible consequences of its spread. In the evening, Manel decides to use his late wife's bracelet as a new collar for his cat, so that it will always be near him and remind him of Julia. Soon he calls his sister and nephew by video link. Manel reports that no one wants to buy his boat because it is old and not in the best condition. After asking her husband to take her son to another room, Belen decides to talk about more important things. Belen, her son, and her husband go to the Canary Islands until the end of the spread of the virus. Mario is a military man and has received urgent orders to move to a safer place to protect people from the possible effects of a new pandemic in the future. Belen asks her brother to join them, realizing that something terrible is coming. Manel refuses in every possible way, but his sister begs him, and he is unable to argue with her, so he decides to join the family in evacuating to the Canary Islands. The next morning, Manel notices that all the neighbors are packing up their belongings to leave the mainland as soon as possible and find a safer place. After putting all his belongings in his suitcase and taking his cat, Manel also leaves the house, heading to the nearest airport. Along the way, he begins to listen to what is being said on the radio and learns that the incubation period for infection is only a few minutes. Some people are openly preparing for the apocalypse and the end of the world, urging the rest of us to pray for God to absolve them of their sins. Manel tries not to panic, and upon arrival at the airport, buys a ticket for the nearest plane bound for the Canary Islands. Soon it is time to take a seat on board, and the line goes through check-in. At some point, the scanner stops accepting tickets, causing the airport workers to ask the queue to wait. Mass panic ensues as all flights are canceled indefinitely. One of the men is not going to put up with this and tries to break through to the plane. Security forcefully stops him, but the passenger grabs a gun and starts threatening everyone present. Realizing that more and more people are succumbing to some kind of madness, Manel leaves the airport with a crowd of frightened passengers. Soon, emergency notifications begin to arrive on cell phones. The government has kept the horror of what is happening a secret until the last, then suddenly closes the borders and airspace. Belen calls her brother to tell him the latest news that has come to her husband's attention. She asks Manel to hurry home and barricade himself until she has more information to determine a future plan of action. On the way home, Manel gets caught in a terrible multi-kilometer traffic jam, causing her to be unable to move. Noticing the confused old people in the neighborhood, the man suggests that they turn around, because they need a destination far from where they are. At some point, Manel realizes that it is useless to wait, and abandoning the car in the middle of the road, returns home on foot. Once in his neighborhood, the man notices the military and an ambulance. He realizes that something terrible has happened and hurries to the place of crowding. Here it becomes known that one of his neighbors has become infected and aggressive like a hungry zombie. Several military men struggle to restrain him and take him away in a vehicle to be transported to another location where he will not be a threat. Struggling with the horror of what is happening, Manel returns home and goes to bed. During the night, he is haunted by dreams that represent painful memories of the accident in which he lost his wife. The next morning, Belen calls his brother again to give new instructions. The government has decided to evacuate the population to create safe zones and prevent the spread of the virus. Mario and the other military officers think this is an extremely dangerous decision. So Belen asks Manel to lock himself at home and do everything he can to avoid a forced evacuation. She believes that being sent to a crowded place will only increase the risk of infection, so it's easier for her brother to barricade himself at home and wait for further instructions. Soon, the government imposes a state of emergency during which they can mobilize citizens for the zombie war. Manel watches videos on the internet of the chaos going on in the streets of Spain and other European countries. He realizes that no one will take care of him or keep him safe, and he can only rely on himself. The man hurries to the supermarket to stock up on groceries, but there is real chaos. The store is not working, and people are like looters stealing everything that is left from the shelves. Manel tries to take at least some food, but it must be held tightly in his hands because others can easily steal the last piece of bread from him. Realizing that there is food not only at the store but also at the gas station, Manel goes there and finds a few cans of canned food. On the way out, he notices a terrified policeman bleeding to death. The lawman locks himself in the gas station, whereupon Manel sees a crowd of people running away from something or someone in terror. Soon another policeman appears and is attacked and bitten by a zombie. Manel decides to help but realizes he can't defend himself. The zombie attacks him, but the policeman eliminates the zombie and then settles the score to avoid turning into the same monster. His partner becomes a zombie, but he does not threaten the terrified man as he is locked inside the building. After rewatching dozens of training videos online, Manel creates a makeshift defense for his home. The man also manages to make a battery-powered security camera so he can keep an eye on the surrounding area. In the evening, the military begins a forced evacuation, reminding people that disobedience risks criminal liability. Manel is at a loss, but his sister writes to him, begging him to ignore the evacuation buses. The military notices a light in the window and tries to force the man to leave the house. They decide to break down the door, but thanks to the extra fasteners, they fail. Not wanting to waste too much time on Manel, the military leave him alone and leave. 2 weeks later, communication lines have collapsed since the start of the special state, leaving Manel unable to contact his sister. He does not know the fate of Belen, her husband, and her nephew, but continues to record messages to them, in the hope that they will see them someday. The man's supplies are depleted as he was not prepared to survive and did not have time to buy groceries. Thanks to solar panels, he has not lost power, but is forced to leave the house to find food. Realizing that it may not be safe outside, Manel puts on a diving suit and hand protection to prevent being bitten and subsequently infected. Among his weapons, he only has an underwater shotgun with metal arrows, but that's enough to stop the hungry monster. While searching for sustenance, Manel makes his way around the houses in his neighborhood. He searches several dwellings, but finds nothing suitable. In one of the houses, the man meets an elderly woman named Gabriella, who did not join the evacuation due to the fact that she is confined to a wheelchair. The old lady has often watched her neighbors from her window, so she knows everything about everyone. She decides to help Manel and tells him which houses he should go to first. Listening to the woman's advice, he gathers a meager supply of food, as well as a helmet and a motorcycle. This allows him to move around the city more quickly, expanding his area to find food. Realizing it's still not enough for two, he heads to the quarantine house where the infected neighbor was. At one point, Manel hears rustling behind him and, startled, shoots, nearly hitting the survivor. The guy runs away, afraid of the man, and Manel finds canned food and other food, which allows them to organize a joint dinner with Gabriella. In the evening, Manel talks to a neighbor and learns that the family abandoned her during the evacuation, considering her a burden. Manel also talks about the family and Julia, whom he still misses. Manel has found walkie-talkies, which allows neighbors to communicate without leaving the house. During the night, an old lady reports hearing some kind of message on the radio. The rescue squad is urging the survivors to go to the mouth of the Arosa River for evacuation to the Canary Islands. Manel offers to go there and persuades the woman to agree, as food supplies are running low. She agrees to go there by boat, provided she is not a burden to her neighbor. The next morning, Manel packs his things and, taking the cat, goes to the neighbor's house. In her house, he finds a farewell letter and the body of a woman who has decided to take her own life. She decides not to burden Manel's escape, realizing that it is too difficult to escape with an invalid. After saying goodbye to her neighbor, Manel returns home and is attacked by zombies. The girl who lived next door not too long ago has lost her sanity due to the virus and tries to bite Manel. Defending himself, he punches the zombie and apprehends thanks to his hair stuck in the car door. Moments later, the zombie attacks Manel again, but he executes the girl with an accurate shot from an underwater gun. After scribbling a couple of messages to his sister and sanitizing the single arrow, Manel gets on his motorcycle and heads for the dock, where his boat is supposed to be. He moves along the highway, but it is blocked by a military convoy. The soldiers themselves are no longer there, but it does not work, because of which the man is forced to move on dirt roads through the forest. Here there are hundreds of zombies that chase him, trying to turn Manel into their food. Avoiding the bites, the man tries to escape, but soon loses control and falls. He's unable to start his motorcycle, so he is forced to flee. Closing the door behind him at the last moment, Manel makes it to the dock, but notices that all the big boats have disappeared, including his own. There's only one boat nearby, and the man heads towards it, but he fails to get the engine started. Hearing strange noises, he goes downstairs and finds a toddler in the cabin, also turned into a zombie. Not taking the risk of traveling with such a traveling companion and lacking the moral strength to execute the little zombie, Manel leaves the dock in an inflatable boat. During the night, the engine fails due to floating corpses, and the man finds himself alone in the middle of the river. Soon, he spots a boat with several people on it and asks for help. As it turns out, they are armed Russian sailors trying to find food near their ship. Upon arriving at the ship, Manel meets Prochenko, a Ukrainian firefighter pilot, and the only person who speaks Spanish. Prochenko informs Manel that he has found himself on Captain Ushakov's ship and can become a member of the crew. After getting to know Manel better, Prochenko deceives Ushakov, claiming that the Spaniard is an engineer who can be useful to them. Manel is given food and a bed to rest in. During the night, the man is awakened by a strange noise and sees the arrival of another group of refugees asking for help. The next morning, Manel notices signs of beatings on Prochenko's face and tries to understand what happened. The Ukrainian pilot denies both the beating and that anyone arrived on board. A little later, Manel helps the Russians locate useful factories and plants where they could find resources. Once on deck, he sees the crew rummaging through the refugees' belongings and realizes he can't feel safe. Manel tries to talk to Prochenko about it and learns that the people he saw yesterday have become prisoners. Ushakov is building a hideout not far from here and needs workers willing to obey in exchange for food and other resources. Prochenko lied about Manel being an engineer so that he would be treated more loyally. The Ukrainian is a prisoner himself, but is afraid to act in any way or warn people of the danger. Manel offers to escape and head to the hospital where his spouse lost her life. There is a helicopter there that they can use to go to the Caribbean islands. Prochenko is too afraid and refuses the idea, knowing the possible consequences. In the evening, Manel sees several more boats and realizes that the Russians continue to take hostages, turning them into their slaves. While most of the crew is busy examining the refugees' belongings, Manel prepares to make a daring escape. To do so, he puts on his suit and protection and arms himself with a shotgun and arrows. Noticing that a guard has left his post, Manel goes to the engine room, where he discovers two surviving prisoners. He frees the men, but one of them begins to scream. The captive wants to find his family and makes a lot of noise, but he is spotted by the guard, who immediately executes the man. The armed Russian holds Manel and the second captive at gunpoint, threatening them to pull the trigger. Prochenko is the first to hear the shots and arrives on the scene, but only to execute the Russian and help Manel escape. The trio steals a motorboat to escape and try to act as quietly as possible, but they fail. The guards notice the escape attempt and open fire to kill. As a result of the firefight, the refugee loses his life and Prochenko is seriously wounded. Once on shore, Manel executes a zombie to retrieve his vehicle. He heads towards the hospital and feels utter disappointment when he notices that the helicopter has disappeared and the rescue plan has collapsed. Manel takes Prochenko to the hospital to treat his wound as he suddenly hears someone's voices and realizes they are not alone here. Leaving his Ukrainian comrade behind, Manel decides to look around the building. He soon finds a way to talk to the barricaded survivors and tell them about the wounded man in the operating room. This is also where Manel is attacked by a zombie, but he easily eliminates it. At the noise, other zombies in the hospital begin to flee. Manel tries to escape from them and is saved thanks to Lucia, a nurse who opened a metal door. As it turns out, there were 5 in the hospital: Nurse Lucia, Nun Cecilia, and 3 children of deceased employees of the medical facility. The women agree to help and operate Prochenko. At the same time, Manel decides to be kinder to the children and allows them to play with Luculo. A little later, Lucia reports that they managed to save the Ukrainian, but he has a fever and needs time to get better. Manel tells them that they arrived here looking for a helicopter, but unfortunately, they didn't find one. After learning that one of them is a helicopter pilot, Lucia invites Manel to the roof of the building. There she shows the helicopter, which is in the courtyard that was taken over by zombies during the evacuation. They could escape, but it's too dangerous and it's not certain that they'll be able to make it through 100 hungry and angry zombies. Manel learns that the children have lost their parents, but Lucia and Cecilia openly tell them without trying to deceive them. Realizing that you have to be able to accept your pain, the man goes to the room where his wife was after the accident. He remembers how she fell into an eternal sleep and tries to finally come to terms with this loss. The cat helps Manel learn to appreciate what he has. Manel realizes that he must help the children and give them a chance to be saved. After leaving his late wife's bracelet on the bed in which she took her life, Manel returns to the roof. He is recording another video for his sister when suddenly a connection appears. Manel receives dozens of messages from Belen and promises in the return video that they will meet soon. Soon he hears the sounds of gunfire and notices that Ushakov's men have arrived at the hospital, trying to find supplies. The team is forced to evacuate through the underground boiler complex and can't wait a minute. Covering their mouths with wet rags to make it easier to breathe, the group heads there. Behind one of the doors, they encounter a worker turned zombie. He bites Cecilia, after which Lucia executes the zombie with an axe. The nun realizes that she will soon become a monster, so she asks to take care of the children and leaves the group. The rest of the group manages to get to the next room, but it's full of zombies nearby and the door is locked. Lucia stealthily sneaks in first and opens the door. The rest of the group follows her, when suddenly one of the girls recognizes the zombies as her mother. She calls out to her, which attracts the attention of the other monsters. The little girl and Manel are attacked and forced to hide in a metal closet. Moments later, the zombies are shot by Ushakov's men, who were looking for supplies. Not noticing Manel and the girl in the closet, they leave, and the group continues on their way. In order to end up on the landing pad, Manel suggests using a protective metal structure made from the frame of several beds. The group fights back with a fire extinguisher and an axe, making it successfully to the helicopter. While Prochenko is trying to start the engine and Manel is fighting off zombies, Ushakov and his team appear on the pad. They order the helicopter to be given to them, but Manel is willing to do anything to save the children. He breaks the lock on a nearby fence, causing a mob of zombies to attack Ushakov and bite him. The Russian team is defeated, and Manel manages to jump onto the ladder of the departing helicopter. Prochenko, Manel, Lucia, and the children are saved and can go to the Canary Islands. As they approach the evacuation point, Manel contacts Belen. Her sister desperately asks to stay away from the island, and at that moment, 2 helicopters fly past the helicopter and are about to bomb the Canary Islands. The group realizes that they need to change their plan, but no one understands where to fly now.